Western militaries are watching what's happening in Ukraine very, very carefully, not only in what's going on in the air, where we are seeing a lot of innovations in how you might utilize these. And I think one of the big innovations that we see is that electronic warfare capability that's really quite interesting and quite new. The Russians are using the Orlan 10 drone, and this is a fuel-powered drone rather than an electronic sort of hobbyist drone. But we're starting to see them utilize it for cell phone jamming, so electronic warfare capabilities. And there's also been discussion of them dropping, or what's called SMS bombing, so mass dropping of short message services, text messages to Ukrainian forces with propaganda, encouraging them to try and surrender, sort of painting propaganda pictures in their minds. And I think that's a really interesting use of these uncrewed aerial vehicles. If you liken military forces to the human body, the communication system is the nervous system. And if you can stop messages being passed through, if you can stop communications happening, that can cause huge amounts of problems for the ability to conduct offensive and defensive operations. If you can't talk to people, if you can't find out what's happening on the ground, and as the West in particular, I think we've become used to real-time information and being able to make decisions with real-time information. So just that encryption, just stopping messages coming back and forth, is a huge part of military operations, and something that perhaps we don't often think about when we think about kinetic operations. We think about firepower, casualties, advances on the ground. But people have to make decisions. People have to communicate that information back and forth in order to be able to make the correct decision and gain the most advantage out of it. We're also seeing it used in the attack role. So things like the Bayraktar, which have got many air-to-surface missiles that are being used to target attack targets of opportunity. But also we're starting to see anti-personnel grenades being armed onto mini UAVs that are then being used to, again, attack formations in the field, perhaps try to attack small formations rather than the larger formations, or perhaps troops on the move that are sort of maneuvering into position, or perhaps trying to disrupt communications, logistics. The attack by the Ukrainians in the naval domain was a huge success, great for propaganda purposes, really gave them a morale boost. How often you will be able to do that, I think, is questionable. I think sort of maybe limited compared to the land domain because it's more difficult. And if the targets aren't within a certain range, you're going to find it's more difficult to achieve what you want to achieve because of just the vast scale of the naval environment. With the Ukrainians forces being brought over to the UK and to the US and other Western partners, we don't know what they're being trained to do. That's all very, very quiet. And so it could well be that they are being trained on Reaper to use the Hellfire, and that we'll start to see then deployed, and it might come as a big surprise because perhaps that operational level surprise would really affect the Russians and cause them huge problems that they hadn't anticipated.